Address by the Speaker.
Honourable members, welcome and a very good morning to you. To all others present in the Council Chamber on this, the 26th day of November 2024, to witness this month's proceedings of Minister's Question Time, a very good morning to you as well. And thank you for sharing your time with us. The welcome and good wishes are also extended to all those who may have tuned their radios to SAMS Radio 1 to listen live to this parliamentary broadcast. We welcome back Councillor Midwinter, having attended the CPA UK Legislative Strengthening Seminar in Westminster to address gender-based violence, and Minister Brooks, who attended the 67th Commonwealth Parliamentary Conference in Sydney, Australia. Not present for this Minister's Question Time is Minister Sibiu, who has represented St. Helena at the UN Climate Change Conference COP29 held in Baku, Azerbaijan, and also the Chief Minister who represented St. Helena at the annual Joint Ministerial Conference, JMC, held in London. All being well, both ministers will return this weekend. This is the 16th meeting of Minister's Question Time since this improvement to parliamentary democracy started on 24th of March, 2023. The topic that councillors have chosen for this meeting is Procurement Regulations 2024. The Deputy Chief Minister was made aware of the topic ahead of this meeting, and an hour before Minister's Question Time commencing, the questions submitted were forwarded to ministers. According to established practice, the order paper would be published on the SHG website this morning. Just so the listening public are also aware, the business on the order paper for today includes an urgent question. This will be dealt with first. And then there are 7 questions listed in alphabetical order for selection randomly, as is usual. All these questions are directed to Minister Brooks, the Minister for Treasury and Economic Development. Agreed amendments to the standing orders make it possible for councillors to now ask multiple supplementary questions instead of just one, which was the case previously. Effectively, this makes it possible also for other ministers to give support answering questions once the minister to whom the question has been put has acknowledged the original. Up to 1 hour has been allocated for all questions. If it appears that a question or questions is in danger of not being asked due to the time constraint, in accordance with Standing Order 9, Rule 15, the question that is not addressed may be addressed at a subsequent sitting. Just as a reminder, honourable members, push your red light if you wish to speak. Apart from when there is a question on the order paper in their name, honourable members may only rise on a point of order or a point of information, and you need to say which one it is, please. As I always remind members, an important consideration is please don't draw the speaker's attention when someone else is speaking, because that person could be interrupted. And just as a reminder, this would be an infringement of Standing Order 15, Rule 3. Ms. Morgan Thomas Henry is our clerk and timekeeper for today. May we have the first item of business, please? But before then, I'm so sorry, I've just noticed that our Attorney General isn't here. So I guess he's got a good reason for that. And someone is indicating to me that could they take their jackets off? Well, please do so. I understand the Attorney General can't make it because there's a court in progress today. Thank you all very much. Secretary, Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, may I rise on a point of order?
You may.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm somewhat confused as the subject matter of the item listed on our order paper as an urgent question was discussed by councillors when we met 2 weeks ago on Tuesday the 12th of November. And yet this question was only shared with councillors yesterday and our ministerial colleagues this morning. Mr. Speaker, if this question is indeed an urgent and nationally important nature, then why did our honourable colleague not share this with us all much earlier, via alternative means that are available to members of this honourable House? Mr. Speaker, may I respectfully suggest that we need to clear a procedure on urgent questions in our standing orders.
Honourable Member, thank you very much. There is an already agreed procedure, and you find that in the standing orders. Please, when you go back to your office, read that. Now, you can't speak anymore. In terms of why you're shaking your head, Honourable Member, and that is an infringement in this House, in this chamber, my chamber. Okay? Let's get on. Let's get on with the business that we are here for today. In terms of whether a member didn't share things with you 2 weeks ago, I have no knowledge of that. No knowledge of that at all. And as far as I am concerned, this is a matter for today. It is on the order paper. So be it. Please start. Thank you very much.
Urgent question. The Honourable Carl Thrower.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I do realise, actually, in reading this question, that I didn't direct it to a minister. So what I'll do is I'll direct it, if it's okay, to the Honourable Deputy Chief Minister, simply because he currently represents the government and the question does mention it's a request of the government. Due to the significant recent changes in the landscape of on-island media provision and the conclusion of the 2016 media review that local media is vital to democracy, in informing the community of news and events, as well as playing an important part when the island needs support if and when unforeseen events occurs, will the government establish an independent review of the current provision of media services on St Helena, assessing the market, viability, technological changes and the long-term sustainability of the current offering? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chief Minister.
I thank my honourable colleague for his question. As he obviously knows, this isn't my particular area. However, I have had some time to look at it. But as my honourable members might be aware, we already have a service level agreement with South Atlantic Media Services, SAMS, for the provision of radio service, whereby a subsidy of £28,000 per annum is paid to SAMS for services, including a minimum of 52 hours live radio coverage each week for all 52 weeks of the year, of which a minimum of 5 live hours will be delivered on both Saturdays and Sundays, of which will include a minimum of 1 hour interview each week. The relay of the BBC World services for 52 weeks of the year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The delivery of a cross range of radio shows that will each week include current affairs, music, sport, health promotion, culture, arts, programs for children and young people, a minimum of at least 1 local up-to-date news bulletin for each day of the week to exclude weekends. The arrangement is reviewed on an annual basis as part of the budget process. With regard to the members' request for an independent review, I think it would be prudent to revisit the findings of the 2016 media review, and then the government can consider whether a further review will be necessary. We will also need to bear in mind whether there will be any financial impact, and if there is, where will the funds be sourced from? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Honourable Carl Thrower.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Honourable Minister for the answer, but actually I was trying to think of a much broader subject. So what you've just referred to is one media outlet, but actually we've seen very significant changes. So we're looking at changes to even how TV is delivered on Ireland. More and more people are now streaming. So what is the viability of a new provider, remembering that we're currently looking at changing a network service provider and maybe an internet service provider? how are we going to provide TV services in the island? Is it still viable to provide them by an antenna delivery system at all? More and more people are streaming. But also, I was thinking also more of mobile phone usage. So you've got to look at how much media is used on mobile phone. We can't just think about how it's provided on island. Actually, the majority of listeners of the radio stations now seem to be overseas. When you talk to the providers of the radio services, there are hundreds and thousands of maybe 1,000 people listening on island most of the time. But if you look at the streaming services, since some of them went onto Elixir and things like that, off island there are a few thousand people and more, and that is growing. So this wasn't just about media as in what the radio and SAMS provide, but a much broader subject. What are we doing with media moving into the future? How are we going to get the media to the people in the future? We're already providing them, and I'll say I personally use Netflix and Amazon. That is a way of watching TV. I watch my news through YouTube. So once again, this was not covered in the 2016 media review because it was not the standard in 2016. And that's why I propose that we actually need to do an up-to-date media review, just because the landscape has changed so much, but much wider than just what SAMS or just what Saint FM and the Independent provide.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I just didn't want to stop you in your tracks, but can you follow that up with a question?
Yes, that's why. So will they? Sorry, Mr. Speaker. So that's why I think that we need to. So will they undertake the question and look at establishing an independent media review for those reasons?
Thank you. Understood. Honourable Member, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I've answered the question, actually,
Okay.
but what I would say is, I was going to say this at the beginning, but I choose not to say it at the beginning. But I do believe that what my honourable friend has put forward is more like a motion rather than a question, and maybe in the future he probably look at putting a motion in the House, and then he can stipulate various issues that he wants to cover and so forth, and then we can consider that motion going forward.
Good point. Good point. Anyone else wish to speak? And just before we go away from this, yesterday, the Honourable Deputy Chief Minister got in touch with me and asked me what might be on the order paper in terms of the urgent question, because I had courtesy to tell him that there was going to be something on there. I congratulated him for doing that, and I gave him an idea of what it would be. That is my prerogative. That has been done. Thank you very much. Move on, please. Next question.
Questions. The Honourable Ronald Coleman.
The Honourable Ronald Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Honourable Minister for Treasury and Economic Development tell this Council what is his and SHG's understanding when contracts are advertised, which sometimes also state that interested parties should note that this opportunity is not being advertised overseas?
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister for Treasury and Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, may I just state quite clearly for the listening public and for members of the House just some facts about procurement regulations before I proceed in answering my honourable friend's question.
You may do
So,
that.
just not to confuse the listening public, the procurement regulations is not a policy or it's not strategic. It is, as it states, regulations. And regulations of this nature is approved by the governor because under the Constitution, the governor has responsibility for public finance. And that stays the same in relation to the review which was just done in November this month, which has now come into effect. So just want to make it clear that myself as the minister, which is being asked to answer these questions, doesn't have the responsibility for regulations as we do with policy and strategic direction within our portfolio. And because of these are regulations and not policy or strategic direction, it's hard to talk very high level in terms of this, because with regulations, the devil is in the detail, and you need to understand the detail before you understand how the regulations is meant to work. So just to state that, but I will go on and try and answer the questions, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Minister.
And I will answer my honourable friend's questions, which is about the tender's note that this opportunity is not being advertised overseas. So my understanding of that is really quite simple. It means that tenders that is advertised would only be accepted if there are from local companies. So if there was a bid from an overseas company, not saying that a company can't bid, but they would just be disqualified because they're not registered on the island as a company or as an individual. So I think that answers the question, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Ronald Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So if the contractor was registered on Ireland but was overseas, they still could tender.
Honourable Minister.
That is very technical, but I would imagine, and as I said, I am here trying to answer as a member of the team that has been consulted on and has fed back. My understanding of this is that, yes, if the member of the company or the individual had a registered company on St. Helena but was overseas at the time of the tender being launched, they can't submit a bid. I guess the only requirement is that they're back on the island when if they actually win the bid to implement the procurement or the contract, whatever it is. So I would suggest that is the answer, but I could be corrected, Mr. Speaker, because that is very much in the details of the procurement.
Very much in the detail. Thank you very much. Next question, please.
The Honourable Dr. Corinda Essex.
The Honourable Dr. Corinda Essex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Honourable Minister for the Treasury and Economic Development tell this Council what action has been taken to ensure that the procurement regulations are fully aligned with both the Public Finance Ordinance and financial regulations, particularly with regard to asset disposal?
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister for Treasury and Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for a question. So we have aligned the procurement regulations with the Public Finance Ordinance, particularly the financial regulations, which mentions the procurement regulations. But we do recognize that the financial regulations will need to be reviewed in the near future. But some work has already started on this already, but we're still a little way to go before we can review the whole Public Finance Ordinance. So I think in terms of what has happened in asset disposal, we did have a report from Select Committee, which we did look at and took some feedback from that report. And so that has led to changes in how we dispose of assets and stocks and stores for disposal. It is set out in the regulations in section 43. I don't think it will be viable or beneficial to the public or members here for me to read through this, Mr. Speaker. But I would say if anyone wants to have any more information around how the changes has been reviewed and implemented within the new regulations of 2024, it does explain section by section, starting at section 43. So I would encourage members of the public who has any interest or has any concerns to read that section. And of course, this is a review that has happened, and I know we've been calling for this review for a number of years now. I think finally we do have a review of the procurement regulations, and that has been approved by the governor. But it's not necessary to say that this is the perfect solution. So we always will accept feedback from members of the public, especially those ones who use the procurement services on a regular basis. And if we feel that some of the recommendations hasn't quite been implemented in the way the report recommendations was sort of trying to ensure, then we can look at this further. So what I'm trying to say, Mr. Speaker, regulations are there to be reviewed as and when they are needed. And we have completed a review, so I think from my perspective, we would have to see how these regulations are implemented and how they work for the benefit of the public finance and the public or contractors who would be using the system. So all I would say is, let's try this, and then if there is any issues with the way this is done, we can have another review of this probably sometime in the future, but until that time, we won't know. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable Dr. Corinne Essex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable friend for his detailed response. He made reference to the fact that it is anticipated that a review of the public finance ordinance will take place. Can he give some indication as to when that's likely to commence, please?
Thank you, Honourable Minister.
So we've looked at some of the finance regulations already, but the finance ordinance is a bigger piece of work that which will need doing. Obviously, we're trying to implement new financial services on the island, so we're looking at holistically all the regulations and ordinance around financial services. Public finance ordinance is slightly different, but obviously we will probably need the same skills and experience to look at that. So we will try and do this as and when we have the capacity and the capabilities to do this. At the moment, this is something that is on our to-do list, but it isn't high up in the priority in terms of the legislative program, but it is on the legislative program. So I would just say that it is our intention to review this, but at this very time, I can't say a date, Mr. Speaker. It will all depend on the capacity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next question, please.
The Honourable Elizabeth Knight.
The Honourable Elizabeth Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Honourable Minister for Treasury and Economic Development tell this Council what are the benefits of increasing the discretionary amounts from 5,000 to 30,000 that the accounting officer can spend? Thank you.
Thank you. You meant 5,000 and 30,000 pounds, I assume.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for her question. So I know the Honourable Member looked at a certain detail in terms of the discretionary amount, but I just say the whole procurement regulations has introduced several changes at the aim to bring about process improvements, removing administration burden, and bolstering the regulation compliance. So I think if we are talking specifically about the 5,000 threshold being moved to 30,000, this will come into effect with each of them, process improvements and administration burden. So the idea is to streamline the process by changing this requirement, and also that will help obviously speed up the process. And it actually gives some flexibility to the accounting officer to be able to sign off or approve these projects. But there is a caveat. It depends on the complexity of the tender as well, or of the procurement. So in the table within the procurement regulations, it sets out what is a low complexity, a high complexity, or medium complexity, and a high complexity. If it's deemed a low complexity, it means that the portfolio or the accounting officer, portfolio director, would be able to sign off on that, but obviously it still would be in consultation with the minister, with the portfolio, and with the procurement services. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
The
you.
idea, the objective is to allow a bit more flexibility and to speed up the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Honourable Minister Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to help my honourable friend out here, just reviewing it and looking at it from the operational side, for instance, within health, shifting that particular burden further up to £30,000 when you're in a healthcare environment where that kind of money actually is relatively small. It significantly helps the operation. So that's one aspect of it. But it also, remembering that we have issues always around being able to get stuff through the AG's chambers, and other important pieces of work that needs to be done. It frees up that as well. So I think, although this is just a one-liner, so to speak, in terms of what it does operationally, it helps SHG all the way around. And just to add that we also have far more scrutiny in place now as well. So being able to increase it up to £30,000, the accountant officer is always under the scrutiny of the financial secretary as well as members of this chamber. So it's covered and protected as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
No, thank you very much. Honourable Carl Thrower.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I may ask the Honourable Minister for Treasury and Economical Development, I don't expect him to have this answer to hand, but it would be nice to be supplied it in writing. Would it be possible for you to be able to supply to us what percentage of tenders this change should help? So is it about 25%, is it 5%, etc.? Thank you.
Is that?
Can I just ask for clarification from the honourable
Yes, you may do.
member? You mean historically?
Yeah.
You mean historically, if we look at over a year or 3 years, how many contracts now the new requirement will apply to? That's what you're asking?
Yes, I think 1 year would be plentiful, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, thank you.
I can ask the team, the procurement service team, if they could supply that information, but I can't give an undertaking here that information will be supplied. It's not within my gift to obviously instruct things to this, Mr. Speaker, so I'll have to check. And if it is available and it can be supplied, I'm getting a thumbs up from behind me, so I'm guessing that we can supply that information to this Honourable House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That seems very helpful. Thank you very much. Next question, please.
The Honourable Andrew Turner.
The Honourable Andrew Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the Honourable Minister has already answered large parts of this question anyway, and I wouldn't expect him to repeat himself, but this is obviously looking at a slightly wider context. So will the Honourable Minister for the Treasury and Economic Development tell this Council how the new procurement regulations have been aligned to the Public Finance Ordinance?
Honourable Minister Brooks.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I have kind of answered this question, but I would just mention one thing. The new procurement regulations are issued in accordance with Section 5 of the Public Finance Ordinance 2012. So any members of the public, including my honourable friend, if you want to know how these two pieces of legislation or regulation aligns, then I think start with the Public Finance Ordinance Section 510, and that should guide you to, or give you some sort of understanding how these two pieces of documents, the ordinance and the regulations, kind of aligns to one another. And I think if there's any more questions around here, I'll be happy to take that outside this forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next question, please.
The Honourable Carl Thrower.
The Honourable Carl Thrower.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I may, I'll just start by stating a slight conflict because I am the Vice Chair of the Chamber of Commerce, and I know this question has been asked over the years in the Chamber of Commerce.
Noted.
Will the Honourable Minister for the Treasury and Economical Development tell this Council to ensure that smaller contractors, particularly those who may lack the necessary IT skills or resources, are not excluded from the tendering opportunities and would possibly deliver better value for money for the public purse? Will the Honourable Minister for Treasury and Economic Development tell the Council, has consideration been given to allow tenders for smaller contract values to be processed outside of the e-tendering portal and procurement system?
Thank you. Honourable Minister for Treasury, Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, just for clarification, because my honourable friend mentioned small contractors, but you also mentioned small contract values. So I don't know which one it is. I would say we would be looking at small contract values rather than small contractors, because small contractors can still bid in for a high value contract. So small value contracts, as I think you will be pleased to know, can be done outside the portal, but it needs to have the low complexity. So the procurement service will rate it as it does within the procurement rules. They will rate that as a low, medium, or high. If it's a low complexity, then it can be done outside. But I will say, and especially because I'm speaking publicly, that the procurement services does offer support. So if there's any small contractors out there who isn't familiar with IT skills or using the e-tendering system, please just walk into the post office, go and see the procurement team, and they will support you in trying to educate you in how to use the e-tendering system. We want to be flexible enough to allow companies to not have to use that system. But we also want to be a government that encourages companies to use those kind of systems, because that is the way the world is going ahead. If one of these contractors, just starting off, a small contractor, started using these e-tendering systems, if they ever go abroad and continue that career, they would most certainly have to use these kind of systems. So I would say I would encourage anyone who isn't sure about how to use it to come in and speak to the team, and they will give you some training on how to do this. So we are allowing a bit of flexibility, but it's not being encouraged. It's more being encouraged to try and get the training to use the e-tendering system. The e-tendering system makes it more transparent and in some cases more straightforward than doing a tendering exercise using an email documentation or any other form of submission. So that's all I would say, Mr. Speaker. It is open to anyone in the public who is using the system. The training is free. Just walk into the post office, talk to the team, and they'll arrange to sit down with you and help you load these documents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honourable Colfer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll state our rise on a point of information on this one, because I just want to thank the Minister and his team for that very important change. And that is really good, and I'll certainly pass it on to people who have been asking for a long time for that. So that's really good news. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Honourable Minister.
I would just like to respond. Yes, I will accept the thank you, but this has come about because of feedback from all of us and all stakeholders. So this is not coming from me, and though I like to stand up and take the applause for it, this is coming from the consultation that we did with all stakeholders and people asking for this flexibility. So it's really only my job to take that feedback and actually make sure it is in the recommendations that did go to the Governor for approval. And that's why when it came to my advisory board to review, not to approve, I must say, that was one of the things I made sure was flexible enough to allow new businesses, small businesses, to still be a part of tendering, but not necessarily using the full IT works that is there available. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honourable Councillor Essex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Minister made reference to ad hoc training when an individual goes in and wants to basically submit a tender. Can consideration be given to having a structured training programme for stakeholders? This was something that was promised in the past, but because of changes in personnel within the procurement service, it never actually came about. 2 individuals who were contracted from overseas were expected to deliver this training, but because they both left well before the end of their contracts, it never took place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honourable Minister.
Sorry, yes. Could my honourable friend, is at the beginning, I heard the word ad hoc, but I don't remember saying it. Sorry, could you just explain what you mean about that?
Certainly, Minister.
Can one of you sit down, please?
You did not use the word ad hoc, but if someone goes in and is just given training because they said, I want to submit a tender next week, can you show me how to do it? That is ad hoc training. It is not part of a structured programme. What I am requesting is that consideration be given to providing a structured programme of training, such as has been indicated would be provided in the past. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister.
Thank you. Sorry, my honourable friend, now I understand what you meant. And yes, I don't see any reason why, if we go out for some sort of engagement to see what the request is, or for how many, that we can't do a structural sort of arranged training program or training session. I mean, we can do it as many times as it takes for these people to understand how to use the system. So I don't have anything against that. I think that, again, if we're looking at, while procurement regulations, they are there to deliver value for money, I think that will be value for money. If we can get 4 or 5 in the same room at the same time, delivering that training, it's better than doing it one by one. So, but I just want to make it clear, the flexibility is there that if a tender come out next week and someone is thinking about actually tendering in for it, but not too sure about how to use the system, they can walk in to the office and staff there will show them how to use the system. That's what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next question, please.
The Honourable Robert Midwinter.
The Honourable Robert Midwinter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, will the Honourable Minister tell this Council whether or not the Central Union Government buy local policy is still in operation?
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Minister.
I'm not too sure, to be honest. This policy which you mentioned, and I did try to get better background knowledge on this, but I think this policy came in or was introduced a number of years ago. I'm not too sure. But I will say the principles of the policy is still used in the procurement services. But the overall objective is to get best value for money. So sometimes if it shows that an international company or an international firm or international supplier can supply something that is better value for money, not necessarily always cheaper, but a better product, then we will use whatever we feel, or the procurement service will evaluate that to be whatever they feel is the best value for money. So that's all I would say. So it's not necessarily that it is a godsend that we must use local. It is basically what is best value for money, but we will always encourage the procurement services to look locally first. That's all I would say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honourable Robert Midwinter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I may sort of start on a point of information and end in a question, because I too, and I have seen historically, many years ago, a copy of a policy that was an SHG policy on buy local, which did predicate on using local suppliers in the first instance. So that being the case, and looking through, I couldn't find it online. I looked and I couldn't find it online, hence the question. And that being the case, that there is the principle there, I question why it's only noted in the procurement regulations as, and I quote, opportunities may also be highlighted in the local media on a case-by-case basis if the accounting officer or head of procurement services believe it is advantageous to do so. And it's the emphasis on opportunities may also. Does that not conflict with the basic principle of a buy local policy?
Thank you very much. Just to say, I too know of such policy. I'm not quite certain whether it was a written policy, but it definitely was a policy. Honourable Minister.
Well, I would, as I said, I would certainly hope that the accounting officer would apply the principles of the policy. I haven't seen the policy myself. I did do a quick search as well. And I don't know, I haven't read that policy. I don't know what the policy objectives is. I assume it is, as it says on the tin, to always try to use local first. But I will also said, Mr. Speaker, the accounting officer, which is usually our portfolio directors or people who work in our portfolio, does answer to the minister. So if they're doing things that is outside the principles of what the minister expects, then a minister can question the accounting officer on their rationale or their judgment of who they approve as the preferred bidder. Also, part of the review also took into account the ministerial government. So if you look at procurements with a medium complexity, it is done in the advisory board or a project board, which also a minister will sit on. So we do have a bit more engagement in the process now to make sure those kind of things are being looked at and are being used in principle as such. So I just wanted to say that there is a bit more engagement from ministers or from elected members, which hopefully will apply those principles or make sure the accounting officer is applying those principles.
Thank you very much. Honourable Robert Midwinter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, I'd like to thank the Honourable Minister for his response. And just to add that if this is the case, I mean, a number of us do recall this, could the Honourable Minister follow up and make sure that if there is a written document that's reviewed, made compatible and placed in the public domain? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Honourable Minister.
Yes, I will certainly ask the public service if there is any such document that is still in existence and still applied in policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next question, please.
The Honourable Gillian Brooks.
The Honourable Gillian Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Honourable Minister for Treasury and Economic Development tell this Council what in the procurement regulations ensures that the accuracy of the tender process is followed correctly?
Thank you very much. Honourable Minister Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for her question. Is in terms of the accuracy of the tender process, I think all the different levels of approval would help with the accuracy. So, for instance, if the accounting officer or, let's say, the procurement officer says that procurement is launched, it goes, depending on the value, depending on the complexity, but it does go through various stages of scrutiny and checks before it actually is launched. So, again, Mr. Speaker, as I said right from the beginning, it's very difficult to illustrate this by just talking without seeing a visual context of some of the stages. So also we have set out quite clearly the rolling procurement plan, which it's no good for the listening public, Mr. Speaker, but this is a document like this, which basically is a table that shows you the various scrutiny and the various processes and approvals which need to be taken on various complexities and value of contracts. So for me, that helps with the level of accuracy. And if you look in the procurement regulations, at the very back of the document, Mr. Speaker, let me just get to it. When we look at the table of definitions, it says procurement board is a group, is an expert group within SHG. So we'll expect the people on the board and the procurement services to be specialists and experts at doing this. So a lot of it is relying on their judgment and their expertise, as well as I said, ministers' extra involvement under these new regulations. Also, I know this going back to the previous question from Honourable Carl Thrower around the E10 portal. The E10 portal was recommended by audit a few years ago because it actually offers a level of transparency and accountability, and which can't be interfered with, if you know what I mean, because it has to be on the system and everything on the system is logged, and you can see the whole timeline from start to finish. So it isn't, documents getting lost or documents getting misunderstood, things like that. It's quite clearly on there. What you upload stays on there, and then the procurement team can review that information. So I would say the various level of checks helps with the accuracy, but also the portals, the Intent portal system itself, that program, also assures a level of accuracy and transparency. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member.
I just want to say thank you, Mr. Speaker, to the Honourable Minister for that detailed response to me.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions at all? No? Well, that brought it to the end. Honourable Members, I was a little bit harsh this morning. Reason for that is, I don't have to tell you, because it is personal. But reason for that is I probably will have to go off the island next week, and it's not for a very nice reason at all. So I won't be here when you have the formal Legislative Council meeting next week. And so good luck with trying to find a place to hold your meeting, but that will be down to whatever it is that you can do. 10 minutes left. I certainly won't speak for 10 minutes because we've already finished. But yeah, so that is the situation. It's a little bit worrying, but you will know that I won't be here next Thursday. The public will know that also, so I may as well tell you I won't be here next Thursday, and probably we won't be here next Tuesday. But things are being worked out. But thank you for that. Honourable members, that then concludes the Minister's question time for November. Thank you all very much for your valuable contributions. And thank you also to all those listening in the public who took opportunity to listen to this live broadcast. We trust that you found the questions submitted by councillors for this Minister's question time and the answers provided by ministers were both interesting and informative. And as a direct result, you are now better informed. We look forward to receiving feedback from you with much anticipation. In closing, I would like to thank SAMS for broadcasting the proceedings live, and all being well, they will be rebroadcast. I wish you all a very pleasant and productive day ahead. Thank you all very much.